Hey everyone, it is Thursday morning, and that means in our expert series, we bring back Jonathan Twombly. How you doing, sir?
I'm great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So I think it's time, we're 10 weeks into this, right? And unemployment claims, unfortunately, was 2.12 million folks today. So still a shockingly high number,
What does
but
that bring the total to?
41 million, I think it is,
Wow.
41 or 42 million, in 10 weeks, right? So that's a horrible
Yeah.
average. But in essence, I think we're getting to the end of this, right? The more and more states, last I checked, I think 47 are on some path to reopening, and the others will be there in June. So just around the corner. So I think it's time to talk about, the reopening, right? In the stock market, there's a rotation going on, the reopening trade, right? Where people getting out of those five stocks and into the beat up ones, airlines and cruise lines and the like. But for us, I think there's a real estate play, right? There's the multifamily angle, and, collections are good, and, all the liquidity sloshing around the system, and, maybe everything just goes back to normal, huh? What do you think?
Yeah. No. All right. That's it. That's a wrap.
We're done
for today. We're done. Yeah. I think that, there are a lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, believe that, once we reopen, it's just going to be back to normal. And I mean, I think there are like a number of reasons for that thinking. One is it sort of makes intuitive sense. Like you think like, well, the economy was shut down sort of quote unquote artificially because of COVID. And then when it reopens, it'll go back to normal. That's part of it. But I think also part of it is there's also, I was on a call a week or so ago with a professor from Wharton named John Spencer, and he's not a futurist. He's a nowist. I mean, he's sort of like a super trend guy, and kind of like is very, very expert on sort of what's happening below the surface that people aren't really paying attention to.
Okay.
And one of the things that he talked about was that the reaction people are having to COVID is just like mourning a death, that you go through, they're going through the 5 stages of grief. And one of those stages is denial, right? And people are just in denial that there's been a massive change. And I think that that's like a normal human reaction. So I think that a lot of the hey, it's just back to business is from people being in some form of denial. And then sort of on top of that, there are also sort of those permanent bulls who, are the last to capitulate when reality has changed. And you saw this in the last recession too. I mean, it's really fun. I highly recommend going on Google and find what people were saying about the crash like in 2008. And what you find is a lot of very prominent people like Larry Kudlow, who is currently Trump's main economic advisor, was insistent that nothing was wrong. And he was like that. Remember the guy during the Gulf War, what do they call him? It was that Iraqi guy who, the whole Iraq had been completely overrun by the U.S. and he was on TV going, everything's fine.
Yeah, we're
Baghdad
good.
Bob. Was that his name?
Baghdad Bob.
Baghdad Bob. Yeah, so Kudlow was like Baghdad Bob in 2008, and insisting that while everything was crashing around him, it's all under control. It's all fine. Nothing. Ignore the man behind the curtain over there.
Nothing to see here. Yeah.
Nothing to see here. So you see a lot of that, and I think there's less of that this time around, but I think there are a lot of people who are saying like, oh, it's all fine. Now, I think though what's really going to happen though is that when, it may not be, just before we got off the call, you were talking about how you're not worried about collections on multifamily through August because of the unemployment, and that's when that enhanced unemployment is scheduled to run out. I'm assuming there's going to be some kind of extension, but whether it's as generous, I don't know. I think there's going to be a big fight in Congress about that. But I think actually the time when like the moment comes actually is after the reopening, when things don't dramatically improve.
So define dramatically improve, because I think that's what people are struggling to see.
Yeah, well, I guess so. Yeah, it's a good. Thank you for saying that, because what you're going to see in the data is for the third quarter is the best the best quarter of economic growth ever recorded in the history of anything. And of course, the politicians will all run out and grab credit for that and say, you've never seen growth like this before, and it's all because of me.
Yeah.
But it's just going to be because of the reopening. But the problem is that it's coming off a low base, right? So we could have off the base now the base is very low. We could have like 30% economic growth in one quarter, but that will only take us back to like 75% of where we were.
Yeah,
right?
and
So
this is a good point, because I did this for folks the other day, just because people don't get math, they don't get statistics. So follow this logic, right? Let's just say, for argument's sake, that the American economy was $100 billion or $1 trillion, a round number. Let's just
say 100 billion. It makes the math easy.
Yeah, say 100 billion. So let's just tell everybody, right? If the GDP goes down 40% in Q2, that means we will produce from 100 billion, we will go to 60 billion. That's what math says. And then, oh, by the way, let's say we have a 30% return in Q3. Now we go from 60 billion to 78 billion. That's just how math works.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, 78 billion is still $22 billion light from just, what it was
where we were,
90 days ago or 180 days ago. So stats will freak people out. People will be talking about percentages that mean nothing. Against 30% sounds great until you realize we're 22 billion lower than 100.
So watch the narrative, right?
Yeah.
When this happens in the next quarter or wherever the numbers hit, we're still early in the second quarter. So actually maybe the second quarter numbers are going to be the ones that really show a strong rebound. But anyway, watch the narrative, because the narrative is going to be misleading. The narrative is going to be, we have, the most incredible economic growth ever, and therefore everything is fine. And maybe, some of that talk will actually help, because it's all about psychology. Like that'll help restore some confidence, but
for sure,
but the pain is still going to be there. And, what people who are smarter than I and more versed in these things are saying is that, we're going to have 10% unemployment through the rest of the year, at least, right? And maybe into next year. And once the reality of that happens, then I think that's going to change kind of consumer confidence and public perceptions a lot. Because when they see, when people see like their favorite restaurants not reopening, right? When they see, stores that they've shopped at forever not reopening, right? Then that, I think the reality is going to hit them when they can't sell their house because there aren't buyers for it. That's when the reality is going to hit people.
Yeah, I think there's actually another unemployment story that's just starting to trickle, and it's the one that I've been actually telling people I expect to come, and that is that unemployment, the folks getting the new claims are in higher end jobs now, right? The first wave of claims was that hourly worker at restaurants and retail and all the folks that we expect. But now just look at the companies that are coming out and talking about layoffs, right? Boeing, big industrial, HP, IBM. I mean, it's starting to work its way up the stack. And now you're talking about 6-figure jobs and tech. Uber had a layoff, a couple of layoffs here recently. It is working its way up, and that hurts.
Yeah, and that's, a combination of things. One is there's just less demand for all these things. Now, like Boeing is an obvious one. They've had all their orders have just been shut off. Like everyone's canceled their orders, right? Because they're not, the airlines don't know when they're going to be back to normal. So that has the trickle down effect, right? But then, so there's the obvious ones like that. But then there's also, and you and I have talked about this before, corporations will absolutely use this as an opportunity to cut dead weight, to automate, and that is going to cause dislocation. Even if those people eventually find new jobs, there's going to be a lag time between them getting laid off and them finding new jobs, especially if the economy is all, discombobulated. So going back to the question of like what happens to multifamily in all of this, the primary issue is uncertainty. And I think that's what affects buyer psychology, right? It's the uncertainty. It's not being able to come up with a forecast as to where things are likely to go. And that means that it becomes extremely difficult to underwrite under those circumstances because you just don't have any certainty at all where you're going. So in that situation, and lenders have the same problem, right? Lenders have the same issue. So in that situation, because you can't predict the future, you're going to tend to assume the worst if you're conservative, right? Mm-hmm. And that means you're going to want to get a big discount on property before you're willing to buy. And if sellers are continuing to ask peak pricing, which they will, mm-hmm. because it's in the seller's interest, and the sellers, are anchored to those peak prices, and the sellers are going to be the ones who are saying, look, we just had 30% economic growth. Everything is great. Those two, what the sellers are glomming onto as like supporting their position, and what the buyers are going to, glom onto to support their position, there's going to be this big gap, right? What you have at the top of the market is kind of everybody agreeing that everything is great.
Yeah.
And it's going to be that way forever, right? Yep. And you better get in now because otherwise you'll just miss out. Now what you've got is the seller's like, hey, come on, remember it's going to be great forever, and the buyer's like, I can't I don't know what. So yeah. That's going to cause pricing to correct, even if everything else stays the same. But the problem is, it won't stay the same either. I mean, I think you're going to start to see some kind of erosion of collections. Now, it may not be dramatic because of the unemployment support that's out there, but I think there's been so much attention paid to this particular band of workers who are making more on unemployment mm-hmm. than they would at their jobs, right? But that is not everybody, right? No. That's the thing. All the attention's been focused on them, and this is why. Now, I just did this big presentation, and maybe we should have an episode based on this sometime. I did a big presentation the other day about investor psychology, and one of their cognitive biases, which are essentially like rules that we create inside our heads to make the world simpler and make it possible to function in a world where you're bombarded with information. One of the biases, though, that has developed in human evolution is the bias towards stories over data. Right? Because stories are easy to understand and data is not, just like you were talking about a moment ago. So the story of spectacular economic growth is much easier to understand than, it's growth off a low base. That means you're not back where you were. That means there's still pain. The data is the stories are easier. So the story that we've been hearing, the story that's captured the narrative, is all these people who are making more on unemployment than they would at their jobs. And there are a lot of people who are very angry about this situation and they think it's terrible, whatever. That aside, that's not the whole population of the United States. That's not even the whole population of people who are unemployed. Right. People who are above the median in earnings are not going to be making what they are making, even with that $600 a week bonus, right? And that's going to reduce economic activity at the, above the median level, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's going to start filtering through the system. There are also other people who are not necessarily eligible for unemployment, right? Like business owners. Your business goes out of business, you can't collect unemployment in most cases. Now, maybe there might be some wrinkles in the relief bill, but still, if you're not typically eligible for unemployment in that situation. Or freelancers who, the whole gig economy, those people historically have not been eligible for unemployment. Again, there may be some provisions in
the CARES Act,
the COVID bill that the CARES Act that take care of that. But the point is, they're not replacing their full income with that in most cases. So that's going to have an effect. And while all this is going on, it just becomes extremely difficult to know what you're buying, right? You might know what you're buying right now. Right. And typically, when lenders are looking at a deal or investors are looking at a deal, you're looking at the last 12 months. We're also looking at the last 3 months to try to figure out where things are going from here. Yeah. But the problem with that now is that when you look at that T3 data, the trailing 3 months data, it's going to look good. But the problem is, nobody feels that they can predict that into the future. That's the problem.
Yes.
Historically, you have said, okay, I believe that the last 3 months, the next 3 months will look something like the last 3 months, most likely,
Right.
maybe with some seasonal fluctuation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to write in some vacancy to take care of that. Right. But right now, everyone's looking at the world, I think, if they know what they're doing and saying, okay, great, T3 looks fine, except we know that this is a different world. This is not necessarily, we can't extrapolate this into the future because we don't know what the future holds. And that's what's going to cause the disconnect. Of course, the sellers are all going to say, hey, look, it's all great.
Yeah, here's my T3, take it.
Here's my T3, take it. But I think that the banks and the buyers are going to say, I just don't know. And if I don't know, I'm not going to move. But believe me, there will be buyers out there.
Oh, I'm seeing them already. Yeah.
I call there's the people who want to be like Warren Buffett, right? But the be greedy when others are fearful.
Right.
People, right.
Yeah.
Those are, so the people there. So all these people who are talking about Warren Buffett, like being, I'm greedy now because everyone's fearful. The problem is the sophisticated buyers they're not fearful necessarily. They just don't know what's going on.
Yeah. There's a difference between fear and don't know. Absolutely.
Right. That's a huge difference.
Yes.
So when I see these people like in my Facebook group going, I'm buying because I'm a contrarian and everyone else is scared. I'm like, no, you don't understand it. This is not fear. This is just uncertainty, and uncertainty causes everything to grind to a halt.
Right.
So those people who are going to buy, those people who think that they're Warren Buffett buyers who are buying now are going to turn out to be Jimmy Buffett buyers. And it's my own damn fault, right? From Margaritaville. They're going to be the ones who are going to buy in this period of uncertainty. Maybe they will get lucky and everything will rebound, but I don't think so. Yeah. I think what's more likely to happen is that, as this plays out, the bad news is going to really hit. It's going to hit the economy, and those, rents are going to be hit, values are going to be hit, and those people will be, left singing the lyrics to Margaritaville. Yeah. It's my own damn fault. They should have known better. So I'm trademarking this now. The Jimmy Buffett, buyers.
The Jimmy Buffett buyers.
Who think that they are the Warren Buffett buyers.
Yeah. So I guess when I look at it, I think there's just three things we have to put out there just so we feel better about what's out there with us. Is if you are really modeling, doing a pro forma or whatever you want to call it on a future acquisition, I think you have to model in rent deflation. Mm-hmm. I think that's only wise. I think you have to model in higher economic vacancy. And I think you have to model in a higher cap rate. And probably even higher cost of capital, right? If you look out far enough. And I don't think the people that I see raving about, oh God, I made an offer and we're close and I might get it. I'm like, I just don't see them doing any of those four things. And that's dangerous.
And again, when you talk about, data and stories and the narrative, recently I saw something about how multifamily pricing was actually up over April 2019.
Geez, I did not see that.
But volume is down by 70%, which means that basically what you're talking about is deals that went into contract before COVID hit at peak pricing, and they're closing now, and they're being reported now. And of course, because they didn't price COVID in, these are kind of like the last wave of the people who bought before COVID hit. And but you're going to hear this narrative about multifamily pricing remains strong, right? And you have to really dig into get past the narrative, dig into the data, see what it really means, what these numbers are actually reporting. It's not all fine, right? Yeah. So, nobody, don't want to be all about doom and gloom, but
I don't think any of this is doom and gloom. We're both going to continue to invest in real estate and multifamily specifically. It's just doing it in a safe manner. Yeah. And the future is very different than the last decade, right? You should have rent deflation. Was that even a part of any of your models 5 years ago? No, not in mine, right? It's going to happen, right? Economic occupancy is going to go up, or economic
vacancy.
Vacancy. Yeah. Sorry. That's going to be a problem. And heaven forbid, cap rates, right? That's going to be a big cap rates are going to expand. Model them in.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to want, that's just your risk premium, right?
Yeah.
People are going to want more of a risk premium to buy anything. I mean, there was something that circulated around, I'll have to dig it up again, but about a month ago or so, maybe even longer ago than that. Everything's blurring together now through the COVID thing. But someone polled institutional investors about how they're going to underwrite going forward. And some, there was like 40 to 50% of them said that they were going to be underwriting zero or negative rent growth, right? Wow. And as soon as that happens, I mean, that alone causes pricing to drop, right? Because if you're an IRR based investor, as these institutionals are, then what they're looking at is, if they're saying I'm going to be modeling in zero rent growth, then that destroys your IRR unless you're buying at a really low valuation going in, right? So, what that says to me is that very little buying is going to be going on, except for, for a while, distress. There's still some 1031, those folks with the 1031 money, and they're right in the middle of that.
Retrade, yeah.
They have to retrade, and especially the ones who are not the ones who are like just greedy and don't want to pay tax, but the ones who have like refied so many times that there's no cash to pay the tax with, unless they dig into into other properties or other savings, other holdings to generate it. Like those people who are like really have to do a 1031 are in a really sticky situation right now, because it's going to be very hard to find deals that make sense to them, that the sellers are willing to part with for those prices. As hard as it was a couple of months ago, at least the data looked good and people could kind of, pretend that it was going to be great forever, but now they can't do that. So it's going to be, it's going to be interesting.
It is going to be interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, given you're in New York, is do you believe the hype around this suburbia trade where more and more New Yorkers are leaving? And frankly, I could say the same thing about San Francisco and going out because, again, their employers are saying stay away? Or do you think that's just a hiccup and they'll all come back?
It's funny you asked that question, because I was thinking about it. There's definitely been, I've been hearing, again, stories, anecdotes about, suburban brokers like in the Hudson Valley or Long Island or whatever, being overwhelmed by the amount of calls that they're getting, right? But I was actually listening to the radio and I heard one of the best quotes ever. This is actually from a real estate industry person who said, the plural of anecdote is not data. Which I thought is brilliant. It's absolutely true. Like you hear a lot of anecdotes, a bunch of brokers telling you the phone's ringing off the hook. That doesn't mean that that's going to translate into sales.
Right.
That means a lot of people are like, some of them are panicking. Maybe some of them were planning to move already anyway, but and this has advanced their calendar. Yeah. So again, too early to tell. Like, I think that this always happens. Like after 9/11, it was the same thing. Nobody's going to want to live in the city anymore. Yeah. No, everyone's going to leave the city. No one's going to want to live downtown. I mean, a few years later, it was as if it never happened. Right. So,
oh yeah, you're right.
So I take these things with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Sure.
That I also, I mean, one of the things that again, remains to be seen, maybe I'm wrong about this, but, I've heard a lot of people who I think sort of tend to be like the New York City haters in the first place. They're like, oh, all these people are going to want to get out of New York City and move down south because they don't want to be in apartments like near other people. And I was thinking, if they're the people who are that scared of coronavirus that they want to leave apartments, why are they going to go somewhere where nobody wants to wear a mask? Yeah. Where they're like, I don't have to wear a mask because it's my constitutional right. And like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. If that kind of logic, I can understand more them moving to the Hudson Valley. Sure. Because if I'm going to be in lockdown, I want to have a backyard like that.
That makes sense.
That makes more sense. But again, it's just too early to tell. There's always this, when these things happen, again, so going back to that presentation I did the other day about psychological biases, this is the recency bias, right? Recency bias is the tendency to overweight recent events.
Yeah.
And it happens every time, that's why, like, after a plane crash, everyone's worried about their plane crashing.
Yep.
Because but it has nothing to do with the data, right? It's why after 9/11, everyone's like freaked out about terrorism, even though your chances of getting caught in a terrorism event are like next to nothing, right? So,
Right.
but everyone's freaked out about that. So now it's COVID is the recent thing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are like making these calls, but it doesn't actually mean they're going to move, right? It doesn't actually mean anything. Some of them will, but like, we just don't know what the extent of it is. I do think, by the same logic, if people are saying, I don't want to live in New York City because it's so crowded and there's all these other people around, and like that, why doesn't that logic apply to like garden style apartments in the suburbs someplace? Like,
I think it does actually.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it does. Like, why for multifamily, why wouldn't people be saying like, hey, I don't want to live on top of other people. I want to have my own backyard where I'm not like in contact with my neighbors. I want to go buy a house if I can.
Yep.
I think that
I think we're seeing that already, in at least early data.
Yeah.
Right. Lower entry homes. I mean, we saw record numbers. It was actually up 1% in, let me get this right, I think it was April data, which was a shock, right? They expected it to be down 22%. And it was up 0.86. So I round it to 1%. And it was all the new homes below 300 grand. If it was above 500 grand, dead.
So below the median. It was below the median.
New home, new construction below 300 grand, flying off the shelf.
Interesting.
So I think there is truth to that. And I think I'm starting to think that Class A is going to be in a lot of pain, and Class C is going to be in pain, right? Class A is probably the people with reserves that probably have options, that probably have the wherewithal for a 3.5% down payment and get a cheap home, right, for their backyard. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think when people have been asking me what would you invest in, I had already come to this conclusion before COVID, but COVID just compresses the timing for everything, right? So the B property is the place to be.
Yeah.
No pun intended. And the reason for that is A is what's always overbuilt.
Yeah.
And it needs peak pricing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of it, and and it's the highest rents. And then C is where the people are disproportionately hurt more in terms of layoffs. Mm-hmm. So B is more stable. Now, this goes on long enough. What you're going to see is the A coming after the best B tenants, right? They're going to try to poach those tenants with, with free rent and huge concessions and move-in specials, and like, hey, come and live in like the best apartment in town for what for $100 more than what you were paying at your B property, which doesn't have all these great amenities. Like, you will see that. So B is not, if this goes on for a long time, then B will lose some of that advantage that it has. Sure. But then B will turn around and try to poach the best C tenants, right? So, and then some people will want to pay less and they'll go to C. Like, it'll be a lot of shifting around. But overall, at the end of the day, if there are fewer jobs, that means less renters. And I don't care. I will defy anybody to prove otherwise. If there are fewer jobs, there are more renters. It just doesn't work that way. People will double up. They'll move back in with their parents. They'll get married. They'll get married. They'll move in with their girlfriend or boyfriend before they were planning to. Like, whatever they need to do to save rent or save mortgage payments, they will.
And that's another trend that I see coming, is people are going to increasingly have to double up. So then the question will become, do we double up in a house, which, oh, by the way, combined, we spend an extra $100, or do we double up in an apartment? And again, I just see the single family home being the thing that's hot for certainly the next couple of years. And I'm on record saying the best investment for the next decade. I just think we're moving that direction. So pretty interesting. Any closing thoughts as we kind of wrap up this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about all these issues for a long time. So I think that it's really, the reopening is going to be interesting. Yes. I think we're going to be watching that very, very closely. I think it's more important than that unemployment $600 a week check that people are getting. I think what you see is a lot of with the reopening, people are talking about, the bars are full, the beaches are full, whatever, and of course they are, because all these people have been waiting to get to these places for a long time. Cabin fever, but it's also, again, like narrative versus facts, right? I think, let's pull a number out of the sky.
Mhm.
that, let's just say 25% of the population just doesn't believe that they need to take COVID seriously,
Yeah.
right? They just don't, and maybe they're
It's
right.
some number, yeah, maybe.
But whatever, there's a number of people who just think it's all,
It's a hoax.
it's a hoax, or it's overblown. Those are the people that are all rushing out
Yep.
to go to bars. And so the bars can all be full because that entire 25% of the population is rushing out. But
Yep.
what's going to happen is that after they get it out of their system, these people don't go to restaurants every single day, right? They don't go to bars. I mean, some people do, but most people don't go to bars every single day,
Yeah.
right? And so what's going to happen is after that initial burst of like the cabin fever folks, then they're not going to be crowded like that every day. It's going to drop off because everybody else is still staying away.
Yeah.
And so it's in a couple of weeks, it's not going to look as good economically as it does right now for a lot of those businesses, because the people who are, even if you just, now let's just say on the other extreme, let's just say that there are 10% of the population who are unreasonably afraid of COVID, right?
Yep.
Like the people who are like, I'm not even going to leave my house in a hazmat suit, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to leave my house in a hazmat suit to go to a place where everybody else is in a hazmat suit because this thing can burrow its way through 2 hazmat suits. Like, and I know people like this.
So do I.
I know people like this. So let's just say that that's 10% of the population. That's a huge hit to the economy. Just that 10% of the population who doesn't go out and spend money the way that they normally do. So that's why I think the people who were saying like, we're going to open up, it's all going to be fine, are wrong. And I think, we've talked about this too, the Sweden counterexample.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not looking so good in Sweden at the moment, right? I mean, their cases are skyrocketing and their economy is actually doing worse than a lot of their neighboring countries that went into full lockdown. So, so because people didn't want to go into public places and, economic activity is down. So I think this is the reality that we're faced with, and you should plan accordingly. And,
I think we have that all year. I think all year we have, I call them 3 camps. I think we have the camp that's not afraid. It's a hoax. It's an overblown flu, right? Whatever that is, call it 20, call it 30, call it whatever you want. Then we have the 2 hazmat suits, right? I mean, like my wife is close to that. She's been outside twice in the last 45 days. I mean, like outside, so she's not okay. And again, her status means I need to watch that because I don't want her to piss her off and all of that stuff. And then there's the folks in the middle, like, okay, if I have a mask on and I social distance, I will do things, but I won't go to a restaurant. I won't go to a bar. I won't go to a ball game, right? And I think we're going to have those 3 camps all year. Yeah. And we're going to see what happens. And the good news to me is that unemployment doesn't go out until July 31st. That means we have 2 months to see if the first camp is right, because it's possible that for the next 2 months, it's the summer, higher average temperatures. This thing doesn't spread as much as it does in cold weather. And the opening goes great. That probably pulls people towards them. You go out 5 or 6 weeks and we suddenly see a spike in Georgia or Texas or wherever. That just pulls people the other way. It's going to be interesting.
But I mean, I think also the real danger is the fall, right?
For sure.
And so because I think honestly, if you look at like the data from 1918 and with the Spanish flu, and there are obviously differences, but if there is a second wave, then I think like the panic is going to ensue, because I think that like people will be like, other than those people who are never going to believe it, who are convinced it's a hoax forever, those people will never change their minds. Yep. But for everybody else who's in the middle and is kind of like looking, like trying to figure it out, like trying to really honestly figure out what's going on, I think a lot of those people are going to be like, all right, this is like bad news and I'm hunkering down. So, but again, the uncertainty.
Yeah. I'm still sitting tight. I'm looking at deals. I will, I locked up one in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but it was 40% below what, others would have paid for it. But yeah, being conservative, saving my cash, and I'm watching. So it's going to be interesting.
And I'm bringing investors in. I mean, I've had a big increase in the number of people who've reached out to me recently, because I
Awesome.
think that the message that I've been saying for 2 years now, they're like, oh, okay, this makes sense to me.
Nice.
That, and so, I like, as I said before, there's uncertainty, so we don't know where we are. But I think that the ultimate way that this plays out is that there's going to be opportunity when the uncertainty,
That's great.
when it's over. So I'm like getting ready for that. I'm bringing people in. If you're interested in investing with me, go to my Two Bridges Asset Management website and fill out the investor form and set up a call with me.
Yeah.
But there is opportunity coming. The only issue is we don't know how big, when,
Yep.
and how long it's going to last. Those are the three variables, but it is coming. So we need to be ready for that opportunity.
Yeah. And again, if you're looking at partnering or being an investor with someone, you really should check out Jonathan Twomley and Two Bridges Management. Go back and look he has a channel on this page, a playlist, I should say, a playlist on this channel. And I'd argue, go back and watch our first interview where he talked about he sold his portfolio and why he did it and all the heat he took. And I got to tell you, he looks like a genius. Now the facts bear it out, and he is a genius.
I don't say that, but listen, I will say this about that. I got a lot of criticism from people who accused me of trying to time the market, right? But the fact of the matter is, I wasn't timing the market. I was looking at the market and saying, it's getting very risky, and the risk of a crash is now higher than the risk of me missing out on upside.
Yep.
So I want to take chips off the table before something happens, because the way that these things work is the market goes up and up and up and up and up until something comes out of left field and when that happens, it's all over, and now you've lost your opportunity. So better to lock in your gains and miss some upside than to miss the opportunity altogether and never get those gains. So that was my thinking. So I could never have predicted COVID, never predicted any particular event, but I thought I just knew the risk of, if something bad happened, it would not be good for multifamily. I knew that risk was growing the higher the market went. So that was why I got out.
Yeah. And I think it was really well done. I actually tried to go back and find that interview and make that link right in the top of this description. You got to check out Jonathan, fill out his investor survey questionnaire.
Yeah, it's an investor questionnaire on the website. Yeah.
Very cool. All right, man. Well, thank you very much. And we will talk next week.
Thanks, Michael. See you next week.
Yep.